to you all. I'm sure there'll be a few more people coming in a while. I'm going to be here just for a while, of course. I have a meeting after that, but so I won't be staying throughout. But I'm very happy to have Nicole present for us today, because you know, she's done an awful lot of work on this whole area of cultural influences and aspects around the kind of work that we do with people. And this was brought home to me, especially a few months ago when I was in Malaysia with Maggie, because we were talking to people about the coaching and about the whole problem of diet over there. And the interesting thing is that when I came back, I was talking to people about Malaysia, and virtually everyone said, "Oh, well, they eat so well in Malaysia, don't they? They must have a lovely diet over there. There can't be any problems over there." And how wrong that can be, and how fast things have changed. It was extraordinary to recognize just how bad the diet has become so quickly. And yet, it's not just a case of like the fast food industry just replacing Malaysian dishes or Malaysian foods with the Western junk. It's not the case at all, but essentially they're still eating foods that they consider to be Malaysian foods, their traditional foods. But it's just that it's just so much more loaded with carbs, poor quality carbs and sugar than it used to be. So everything tastes ridiculously sweet. Even, you know, things like satay sauces.
Oh, it's gross.
And everything like that, you know. So it's very interesting how the food industry has managed to sort of get its way in different cultures, by slightly different strategies.
Mm-hmm.
But the old assumptions that we often make about different parts of the world and how they eat are disappearing very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people talk about the Mediterranean diet and all this sort of stuff, and you know, traditional diets. Well, the fact is that wherever you go, more or less wherever you go in the world today, we see the same trends essentially, although in a slightly different, you know, different dishes and things, and slightly, of course, slightly different eating habits as well. But I mean, you know, essentially they've done a great job, the food industry, in getting people to eat far too much carb-rich food and snack between meals, which is of course an invention of the food industry. That wasn't there a few generations ago. So, you know, if you can't just steam into to people's lives if they're from other backgrounds, and you know, we can't be telling. We've got Malaysians coming on the next course, which begins in a couple of weeks, but we can't be telling them to eat porridge and blueberries and linseed for breakfast. We've got to think of other things. So we've got to work with them. We've got to discuss things with them. We've got to get them to give us ideas and stuff like that, you know. So all of this is fascinating and really, really important if we're going to do a proper job here, because we know on you know, on the basic level that the metabolic issues that we have, the health issues, are pretty much the same everywhere. But we've got to contextualize if we want to be successful, because we all know how difficult it can be for people to make changes. Hard enough anyway, you know. But we've got to make it as easy as possible. So that's it. That's my rant over.
Is this everybody that's on?
Yeah. So you've met most of those people.
Hi, Rachel. She can't hear me.
No, but well, she probably, yes, she can hear you, but she can't speak. She can't. She can leave a message.
That's unfair.
Agreed. I want to hear you.
Yeah.
I'm trying. I can't. I haven't got my glasses on, so I can't see.
Oh, okay. So it's Emily. You know Emily.
Yeah. Yes, I know.
You know Emily and Julia.
Yeah.
I'm from Estonia.
Oh,
And
yes.
yeah, and Laurie and Rachel and Vivian, who I think is possibly in Belgium. I'm not sure where she is now in France. So it's lovely. Yeah, there you go. That's all. France. Oh, yeah. She's in France. Oh, hey, Vivian. That's lovely. Yeah, it's really good. Good to see you. Thank you so much for turning up, and it's lovely to connect with you again. So I won't take up any more of your time because you're all fed up with me talking anyway.
We'd love to hear you talk, Richard.
You've had years of that. You don't need to. Okay. So, Nicole, off you go then. And at some point, I might disappear, but don't take that in the wrong way. All right.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Richard. It's a pleasure. And it's really fantastic that you started out by saying some experiences you and Maggie have recently had. In fact, it reminded me that this summer I was in the Himalayas in a far reach of a mountain village. And I met a group of dentists who for about 20 years have been going around the world and offering dentistry to different people. And one of the things they commented on is in the last 5 years, the amount of sugar in the diet, even of people who live in the farthest reaches, has so increased that now they're less doing they're more doing preventative care than they are doing trying to fix things, because they realize that the dentistry, by the time they arrive, is too late. Yes. So his wife, who was a dental assistant, had actually started a program for teaching the mothers how to give less sugar to the babies. Yeah. So it's really something that, part of what you're talking about is the idea that globally things are changing. And that's a big part of why it's important for us as nutritional therapists, as well as I found taking the course, which I loved, and I was really happy to be part of IINH. And I'm so happy always to meet other people who are doing the course. It's great. I found that it was living where I am, offering some of the things that you were suggesting wouldn't work for me. Having lived in other countries, I realized maybe I could offer something back to the course, to IINH, by saying, how can we as nutritional therapists offer something to our clients? So thank you for giving me that opportunity, Richard, Maggie, and Anita, of course. And I'm delighted to see you. I think you're all ladies here, if I saw correctly on the list.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you all for coming. And please, if you have any questions at any time, please write to me, because I'm monitoring the message, the chat part. So I hope for this to be fairly interactive. That is my idea. I have explained for you, I have prepared for you things that we will talk about, I will explain, and a lot of what will happen will partially be because of who we interact with together. So the first thing I want to do, is share with you my screen. Just give me a second to do that.
Nicole, you can access, can't you, the Q&A and the chat?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
That's very good.
So as we can see here, what I've done is I've prepared for us some visuals, because I think this is really valuable to see visuals. And if any of you can turn on your videos, great. I'd love to see your faces. If you can, it's okay. I'll leave mine on so that you can see me. If you see me looking away, it's because I'm looking at my notes. So it's not because I'm not paying attention to you. And if you have any questions, I really repeat, you can tell from my accent, I am American, despite the fact that I live 25 years outside of America now. I really prefer the interactive, so stop me anytime if you have any questions, and there will come a point where I'll stop talking and I will ask you questions. So please feel free to interact. When we first talked about this class, this is the second time we're doing it, and when we first talked about it last year, I really felt like, what could I give back to IINH, because I had gotten quite a lot, and this for me is my sort of bailiwick, as Richard mentioned, both with food, and a lot of what I do as a professional has to do with intercultural interactions. I've lived in Russia, Turkey, Italy, and now Switzerland, and obviously my home country of the US. And my channel, my conduit has always been food. I love to cook, I love to eat, and I love to share with people. When I first lived in Russia, I didn't speak a word of Russian. I was a United States Peace Corps volunteer, and I was there basically to lend support to local NGO, nonprofit organizations. But my first task was to learn the language so that I could interact. And really, I did that in the kitchen. I lived with a host family. They didn't speak English. I didn't speak Russian. And we spent hours in the kitchen and in the markets. And it was one of the first times I really realized how different it is to eat culturally. I grew up in an Italian-American family, tons of ethnic food. My mother constantly cooking Italian or Spanish food. And then when I moved to Russia, it was a whole other paradigm. And it particularly relates to what we do as either health and nutrition coaches or as nutritional therapists, which is the idea of how do we identify what people's needs are, and how do we also identify what their preferences are so that we can put together their needs and their preferences. Because as Richard said, it's really can be difficult to get people to change. And sometimes the changes need to be dramatic if they're terribly ill, but very often we're dealing with people who just want to tweak things. And so if we ask them to do a radical change in every way, it can be difficult. So this class was born as a way to explore how we can solicit from our clients what it is they're comfortable with eating, and then help them bring that into a healthy avenue, if you will. So for example, living in Russia, at that time, it was the mid-90s, basically there were no rules about what you ate when, and what you had for dinner, you had for breakfast and for lunch and for dinner again, maybe, if that was what was available. And that really opened my mind to the idea of how culture affects food beyond what I'd already grown up with. And so we're going to talk tonight about excuse me, how we can interact with our clients and ask them questions and get them to tell us what they like, and then help them to shape what they like into what's good for them. So that's pretty much what we're going to do. As I said, I've prepared the presentation for you. I will give you lots of information, and as well, I will solicit information from you. And then at the end, with Anita's help, we'll take all the information, put it together, and you'll have access to everything for yourselves, okay? So I just want to get back here, and I'm looking
now, Nicole, can I just butt in, because I just realized that we're actually on a webinar as opposed to a meeting, so that means that nobody can talk, they have to type in.
Right.
So,
yeah.
But you're the host, right? So if you can elevate all those panelists to all those viewers to panelists, and that's
how could I do that?
Work. If you
go
go
allowed to talk, I just did it.
Perfect. Yeah, and then you can, and now I can see Emily being muted, and there's Emily unmuted now. Yeah. And for all of those people, if you can do that, then at least
I'm working on it. Okay, there we go. Okay, I did everyone.
Hi.
Thank you, Maggie, for interrupting so that everyone could speak. I appreciate it. I was feeling lonely.
And now you do need to, can you see that some of the people, they are muted, and I'm not sure if they can unmute themselves or if you have to do that. There's a little microphone with a dash through it.
We can.
I think
you can unmute yourself. Okay, perfect. Well, then everybody can talk whenever they want. Perfect.
Okay.
And
great.
Just one more thing, just the last thing then, Nicole.
Yes.
If sometimes what happens is somebody's line gets very noisy.
I'll mute you.
That doesn't work.
Yeah.
So you have to stop that. So, and it's usually nothing to do with them. Sometimes it's a child or a dog or something, but it's often
or a
just
siren or whatever.
Yeah, but sometimes it's just a bad line.
Yeah.
And so you'll need to just to mute them in.
Or we can mute ourselves if we have nothing to say, if we want to listen, and then unmute ourselves if we want to talk.
In fact, this is my suggestion. Logistically, if you mute yourself until you want to speak, it's what I do whenever I'm on a thing, because my computer makes noise and whatever. So, and then speak up. I see that Viviana is off the mute. If there's anything you want to say anytime, please go right ahead. And as I said, thank you. I'm glad. I was a little bit nervous doing all the talking here by myself. So welcome, everyone.
Great.
Okay. And I just want to also logistically let you know that a lot of the slides that you'll see are meant to be provocative. One of my hats is I'm a professional trainer, and so I do my best to limit the amount of information I have on a slide. I prefer pictures and so forth. So it is meant to be provocative and interactive. So I do want to encourage that, okay? So any questions before we start, or any comments? Anyone? Hello? No? Okay.
Sounds fine.
Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay, so first, so basically overview and introductions, we've kind of done that. I've told you a little bit about myself. Really, all you need to know, you're welcome to ask questions as well, but I think it's sufficient for what I'd like to tell you at this point. And then we're going to talk about interacting with clients from different cultures and experiences. And I've created a list of questions that I include on my NT questionnaire that I actually have integrated. I've sort of reformatted the questionnaire to go along with the kinds of clients I have. I live in Lugano, Switzerland. So I live about 20 minutes from the Italian border, and I have anywhere from people who speak English, German, Spanish, French, Italian, people from all different cultures in any given day. So for me, this was really a very relevant point. The third thing we'll do is considering cultural norms and values in diet and lifestyle recommendations. One of the things I think the course does a really good job is respecting people's values and the norms that they have in a general sense. And we're going to talk about that in reference to how do you also begin to enter that in a cultural sense. Now, I noted that Richard mentioned that one of you is coming in from Estonia and another from France. So I'm counting on you guys to also add anyone who's had other cultural experiences. That's really helpful. It will add to the class. And then I've provided for you some multicultural meal ideas, and I've also got some recipes for you, which you can directly get from my website. And then I'll be soliciting from you some recipes, which Anita had also put onto the invitation. Okay, so we go forward like that. Okay, any questions? Anyone? Okay. Okay, so the first one, what I'd like you to do, so now I am going to ask you to talk, is tell us your name.
I can listen to it, but it came up again this year, so I thought, great, I'll do it live. I want to, because obviously I've got a multicultural background, and I'm dealing with Irish, some English, some Greek, and I'm seeing that it'd be nice to know from your perspective, because you've dealt with a lot of nationalities, where do you start?
Okay, where do you start?
Right, okay. Because you're going to deal with somebody who eats differently to what you do. So it's like, right, what's the approach? That.
Thank you very much, Emily.
Thanks.
Who'd like to go next?
Hi, it's Rachel.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi. So it's Rachel. I'm living in Dublin, born in Dublin, but grew up down the country in Ireland in Tipperary. 100% Irish. Love to travel though. So I suppose culture to me means that experiencing other nationalities and upbringings different to my own. Why I joined tonight is for that reason as well, I suppose, really just to get ideas and knowledge from your travels and yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rachel.
Okay.
Next.
Hi guys, Julia here. So I'm very similar to Emily, I suppose. I'm living in Ireland for the last 20 years, but originally I'm from Estonia. Pardon me, but also I have lived in Russia, and I'm also have Spanish with a German ancestry, so pretty much the reason the same.
You are a multicultural being.
Absolutely. My family is all over the place, and kids are Irish. If you ask them, say, "Oh, where are you Irish?" And so I suppose working with the people with different backgrounds, for me, it's important to understand where they're coming from, because like everybody else said, there's no point of telling them, hey, have avocados, when it's not really part of the culture. And so taking back, researching what's in the culture, behind the culture, and what are the preferences of the particular person as well, and then working back from that to bring it to the most beneficial formula for their health and well-being, I suppose.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Julia. Who'd like to go next?
Hello.
I'm taking notes to make sure I get what you need to you.
Hi, my name is Vivian.
Hi, Vivian.
I live in France, but I have lived in Ireland before, 4 years before. I lived in Ireland for 4 years. And I was born in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro. And I have Italian background. So half Italian, half Brazilian. and I live in an area in France which is like nearby Switzerland and Germany.
Where are you?
In Alsace.
In Alsace. Yeah.
So it's a multicultural place as well. And what does culture means to me? I think it's a characteristic of people, of a group of people, that influences and everything how they can see the world and how they relate to religion and food and all the things. And idea why culture matters in ENT. Yes, it's basically what everybody have said. and how you deal with the clients and try to understand them in a better way and try to help them. And one thing I hope to take away from this is, well, to have some ideas how I can deal with different clients in the future.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Viviane. Who'd like to go next? Hello. I know there's more people there. Maybe Basia or Emile. Anyone? Hello?
Hello?
Yes?
Hi, it's Laurie.
Hi, Laurie.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Bear with me, I have a bit of a cold now, so I don't know how well I sound.
Don't worry, you're great.
So my name is Laurie. I live in Waterford in Ireland. Not born too far away. I was born in Wexford. So I suppose what culture would mean for me is it's an amalgamation of a lot of things. It could be like it's your upbringing, what you're exposed to as you grow up, people and any traditions and things like that are ingrained in you as you grow. And why I think that matters in NT is our populations are getting more and more diverse. People are traveling more as well, and I suppose it's good to be open-minded, and what we could consider normal is not normal for anybody else from another part of the world.
Yeah.
So I suppose one thing I want to take away from this evening now is I am qualified, but I actually missed this before, so I really was interested to see it was back on. I was like, yes, let's get back on that. So I'm delighted now. I actually got back on that. I can see this evening. But yeah, as I said, like populations are getting more diverse, and I would be interested to see other people's experiences of how they got around that, and to share maybe one or two anecdotes that I've experienced.
Great. And I definitely will be soliciting you to do that. So thank you for already offering, Laurie. Great, thank you. Anyone else like to go? No? Okay, so I'm going to ask you just one moment, because in my movement to get us connected again, I just need to plug in my phone. So just give me 1 second to do that, because it'll go, because I'm using it as a hotspot, it will run out of battery. So just give me a second, and then we begin the next part. Chip, chip, chip. Technology connected. Now we can continue. Okay, great. And those of you who didn't speak, if you want to, just let us know. Go ahead and pipe in. In the meantime, we'll go forward. I want to thank you, particularly those of you, Julia and Laurie, if I understood correctly, who came back having missed it last year. It's similar to last year, but I have made changes based on having new experiences. And also, it's really important that you will give your anecdotes and offer us things that you've done. So as I'm going forward, if there's a moment where you say, oh yes, that reminds me, please stop me and say, oh, let me tell you that. So I'll be looking at the chat. Okay, how long the webinar will last, just because I have to organize myself. Yes, Viviane, I'm hoping that the webinar should be over within about an hour, okay? It was a little bit longer in the beginning, I'm sorry, just because of the technical difficulty, but we should be about an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes maximum, okay? Thank you very much for asking. And I'm sorry that you have to see my looking at you guys, because you can see my screen, but as it goes, we're all savvy, easy users. Okay, so what is cultural context? So I want to talk a little bit about, most of you have already said this, so why does it matter? Like Laurie said, we're becoming more diverse. Just look at, the 5 of you, or the 5 of you who've spoken. We have Ireland, England, Estonia, Russia, Brazil, Italy, Spain, we have Greece. We have all these different places already within just 6 people sitting on the phone. And that's not counting Anita there from Holland, and Richard from the UK, and Maggie's experiences in Australia. So we have a lot going on with culture. And if you can see here what I have prepared as a slide. I really like this one in the middle here that shows us the idea of spice, and how spice and culture here, the little Swiss one, my husband loves this one, this is Brazil, and so forth. So you see that culture and food really do have a voice for each other, okay? So as we move forward, I move on. Okay, so interacting with clients from different cultures and experiences. So almost everyone said, you know, what is the approach? What is the way I can connect? How can I talk to and find out where they're coming from? And these are the three things that I have found in my practice that really assist me in helping people to understand and helping me to understand them. So the first is, as I mentioned, I've modified my questionnaire, and I have a lot of leading questions. And we don't know, like, for example, I'm here, I can't see you, I have the information you've given me, and I don't want to make assumptions that you're all someone or not someone. I don't know who you are. So even if you're sitting with a person, maybe you have clients in person, maybe you have clients over the internet, you can solicit these things. Two of you mentioned travel as well. So you can even say questions, which I'm going to give specifically, questions about the travels, and ask them questions that also will help you in the idea of the coaching part. You know, what are you comfortable with? What foods make you feel good? What foods make you feel like you're in a safe place? What foods make you feel like you're on your game, that you're feeling strong and aligned? And these can lead you to the ethnic context. I've added them in my pre-questionnaire, and I'll go on and give you some examples of the questions. And then in the first meeting, a bit like we've done tonight, I will often ask my client, oh, I haven't met you before, just tell me a little bit about yourself. And I may ask them, where did you grow up? What kind of foods did you grow up eating? And then explore their cultural norms and create that opening. Two of you mentioned, you know, how do you approach them? How do you connect with them? How do you find their needs? And that's really a valuable thing. Also, just the five of you, you have an incredible diversity, and you can bring that to the table. If the person says, I've never left Ireland, you can say, oh, well, what places have you visited? What things do you like about Irish food that make you feel good? If someone says, like Julia did, you know, I've been here 20 years, but I have all these other parts of my background. Very often what I have found is that people come to me and they say, you know, I forgot that my favorite thing as a child was fennel. And I loved it, and it's really good for my digestion, and now I can start eating it either cooked or raw. So these are other ways to explore. And then finally modifying and building upon the standard questions as a way to open new possibilities. So for example, and let's see, is Julia correct? This may have been part of your upbringing or not, but when I lived in Russia, I lived 10 years there, and one of the big norms was that women don't sit on a cold surface, because sitting on a cold surface will make you either have frozen ovaries or sick kidneys. And so when I'm dealing with a woman who might have come to me because she has a question about this, I ask her, well, when you were growing up, were there any things about your culture or your background that related to that? Do you have any ideas around what may have brought you to have that experience of your body or your illness? So these three things for me, prompt, explore, modify, and build, they're kind of the same in the sense that they're all about how I approach my client and how I integrate into what I'm doing with them, not just the food part, but getting them to feel comfortable and to feel confident in even exploring their own experiences, which they may have forgotten. Yeah? Does anyone want to share an experience or a situation they've had with a client in reference to any of these situations? Anyone? Hello?
I suppose it wasn't a client of mine, it was more a friend, a personal friend, where they were, I got me thinking, he's Muslim and like they practice Ramadan. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking like they'd eat when the sun goes down, which is the middle of the night, where I'm normally telling clients like, oh, like don't eat after a certain time at night if it disrupts your digestion, like, and they're up all night eating before sun up. And it kind of got me thinking, like, you know, again, that's changing my mindset as well as to how I would approach a plan with a client.
Absolutely, yeah. And what did you do, Laurie, for him?
Well, no, I wasn't a client at all. It just got me thinking. Okay. It was a friend of mine that practices Ramadan. Mm-hmm. He wasn't a client, but as I said, he's a friend. So it just got me thinking. I said, how would I approach that? Like, you know, I would totally have to change my mindset.
Yeah, and you bring up something so important, and this is why I use the third one as modify and build, because, and I use it upon standard questions, but it's also, I have to modify my thinking. Because if I say to someone, for example, I mean, I lived in Turkey for 7 years, I had lots of friends who did the Ramadan, and I learned from them that for 1 month they changed their rhythm. So I just opened my mind to the idea that how do you manage that? And then there is, I mean, technically in that situation, if a woman is pregnant or any person is quite ill, there are exemptions from what they're able to do. But in a normal daily life, okay, for that month, how do you modify your rhythm? And as you said, it opened your mind to how would you approach that person? And it gives us that open-mindedness that in itself creates the solutions. So that's a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up, Lori. Does anyone have another situation they'd like to say that opened their mind or gave them an example of this idea of exploring with a client? Anyone? Okay, I'll move forward then. So interacting with clients from different cultures and experiences, ask. One of the things I loved about my first year at IINH is that it was almost completely Richard based, and watching Richard and listening to Richard ask questions and how he would navigate even the most timid or reticent person. And it really reminded me that one of our jobs is to gain trust. And in that gaining trust is to find questions and nuances we can attach with our client to connect to them. And asking questions is really an art in that sense, especially because we're like little private investigators. You know, we have to go around and examine all these little pieces of the puzzle and bring them together. And maybe we know what the pieces may turn out to be, but the client doesn't. And to give them a level of comfort when we're asking them. So for example, when I started with you, I asked you, you know, where do you live? Where are you from? What culture do you identify with? Because the idea is maybe a person has never even thought about it. You know, you said in the beginning, Emily, you know, my mother is Irish and my father is Greek. And I grew up in this very mixed household where I had these influences, and you seem quite aware of that. But sometimes it was someone's grandmother and they have forgotten because now they're 60 years old and that was when they were 10. And to bring them back to that, and to give them that space as well. So what culture do they identify most with? What foods and norms around food do you consider part of your cultural identity? It could be the Ramadan thing. I mean, those of us who live in Europe, in France, or in Italy for sure, parts of Switzerland, people eat at 8 o'clock. In America, people eat at 6:30, 6 o'clock. So how do those things affect? What is the order of dishes? Most people eat their biggest meal at night. All of these different things that seem like banal questions, but they can lead to the kind of opening that Lori mentioned to us, which wasn't related to a client, but just got her mind thinking. And I think for me, one of the things that's really important, which Lori really reminded us, is we are constantly listening to remind ourselves to have an open mind. So then maybe I haven't provided you necessarily with a question, but because you've already got yourself in that wavelength, you create the questions, yeah? Or your client gives you the question, but you're open to hear them and what they have to say. What is your ethnic background, and has it played a role in your eating norms and preferences? Very often people don't realize this. When I was a child, every Christmas and Easter on the table was a plate of raw fennel. And I remember thinking how awful, it smelled like licorice, I didn't like it, and it was my auntie's favorite. And then I came to live in Turkey, and fennel was everywhere, and now it's my favorite. But I had forgotten that 30 years before, this was part of my holiday dinner table. So these kinds of prompts. And are there spices or foods which make you feel more at home, or comfort foods? We've all almost mentioned the idea of porridge. And my British friends, for them, porridge is their comfort food. They'll have it any time of day, but obviously particularly for breakfast. And bringing themselves to that comfort food gives them something really important. I have some Indian friends, it's it's lentils. I have friends who come from different parts of the Middle East, and for them it's hummus. And what those questions asking, what did your grandmother make, or what kind of foods made you feel like you were at home? What smells make you feel like you're at home? I mean, for me, I can't eat garlic, but the smell of garlic, it transports me to my grandmother's kitchen, and it in itself makes me feel happy. And I think one of the things as coaches or nutritional therapists that we often underestimate is the mood and the feeling a person has when they eat. And that goes into the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. But if we can solicit those things from our clients and approach them from a cultural perspective, then it gives them another place where they can feel comfortable making the changes we might be asking them to make. So have any of you had any experiences about any of these questions, but in particular about spices? Have any of you had either experience, as Laurie shared with us, that wasn't necessarily related to a client or with a client, where a particular spice gave you an angle where you could approach someone? Anyone? Oh, we have more participants now. Make sure everyone can speak. Anyone? No? Hello, is anybody there?
I guess Anita here. I guess the Christmas spices would evoke memories for me. The cinnamon and nutmeg and all of that. But it's only around Christmas time. In summer, it's not quite the same.
And what does it do for you, Anita? I mean, is there a particular time or place or situation that then it gives you an entrance into taking better care of yourself or making a certain food?
No, it's just a strong reminder of this is the time of the year that it feels, and you kind of, this whole sort of like darkness comes around, and comfort and warmth and all of that. And that's just the smells and even the look of those spices.
And also what Anita brings up is then we can say, okay, well, at Christmas time, if you're having an upset stomach, you can drink a cinnamon tea to make yourself feel better. And you can make maybe that spice, that aroma in your house if you're feeling down because you're needing to lose weight or if you have a particular illness. So it's a matter of soliciting that information so then you can give it back to the client in a way that they can use it for their own healing. So we continue on. I put will travel for food here. And two of you mentioned that not only is the diversity of ethnic background, but also people can travel more easily. I mean, EasyJet is the bus of the air, right? You can get on it and go anywhere you want. So one of the things that I have found, if people are reticent to talk about what their ethnicity is, or for them they feel that it's very vanilla, I ask, okay, have you traveled anywhere? And has this affected your food and your habits? And if so, in what way? This has been really important in assisting people who are very stuck in their ways, whether it has to do with age or lack of variety in their own diet, to help them reach out of their own mind and find things that can assist them to go beyond their comfort zone in their eating habits. And I found that because people usually when they travel, it has to do with pleasure and it has to do with something that made them feel good. So it helps to get them into a space where I can then offer them something that might be less usual to them. And this is particularly for people maybe who have to make radical changes in their diet but are uncomfortable with it. It gives another space, another platform, if you will, to discuss that. And then what food norms have you added based on your experiences while traveling? And this almost, I would say 99% of the time solicits a response from someone because they remember, oh, I remember I was in Turkey and for breakfast they ate tomatoes and I thought that was really odd. And then they're English and I say, oh, but in England, don't you have tomatoes cooked for breakfast? And, we open a discussion that may not be the end result of what the change will be, but opens them up to the change. Because another part of the idea of culture and food is not necessarily because someone has a cultural norm that we need to fit, although that was the initial reason why I wanted to do this course. But I also realized when creating the course, it also gives a space for people who might not have a lot of cultural experience to be able to open themselves to something new through a positive experience they had while traveling. And then would you consider eating something outside of your normal habits if it will be of a benefit to you? Living where I do, asking an Italian to eat porridge is basically like asking them to eat nail polish for breakfast. I mean, it's just not something that they're particularly accustomed to. But when I ask them this question, it already gets them thinking, okay, I'm having this illness. I have digestive issues. If I continue having a brioche and a cappuccino for breakfast, it's not going to help me. I want to continue doing my norm, but what might I consider? I'm not having porridge. I won't do that. But what would I consider to have? And that opens a whole other discussion. So then maybe they say, well, I might have an egg, or I might consider to have toast. And, you know, you see, it just goes along. And one of the concerns I had when creating this course was it can seem so obvious what we're talking about, right? Especially all of you have experience in different cultures, whether it be travel or family members or your own living experience. But sometimes we just forget because it's ours and we're living in it. So it's like a fish doesn't realize they're in water. So bringing up these things can remind us. So based on that, any of these 3 points that are here, does anyone have an experience they would like to share? Please. Anyone? I'm particularly curious to know what you eat for breakfast in Greece, frankly. If Emily wants to share with us.
Well,
not on the spot or anything.
yeah, no, with an English mom, it was, unfortunately, it was toasted milk the one day and milk and cereal the next day. And eggs at the weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah, now it's not like that. But then, yes, I think that's what everybody would have eaten down there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And now what do you eat for breakfast?
Oh, now it's chia pudding with kefir one day. It's overnight oats in kefir. It's yogurts and what they call the seeds.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The seeds that Richard had told us about, and they're part of life. What is it? Eggs, avocados.
And is it only since you came to IINH that you've made those changes, or what prompted those changes, Emily?
It was the IINH. It was learning more about the adding the variety and the color and the importance, and then noticing how you feel better when your breakfast isn't loaded with carbs.
Mm-hmm. Or sugar.
Oh, I'm one of them. I'm one of them. I feel better without it. Oh, fancy that.
And you bring up something really wonderful, which is color. You know, one of the things that I think is underestimated is how beautiful food is and how just adding a little bit of color can also change. I mean, how many of you, I'm sure, have met people, or maybe yourselves, plan a meal according to the color? So, you know, I can recall watching people eat white plates and thinking, well, what if you add a little red or a little chia, which is a little black, or, you know, this kind of a thing. So it's a matter of finding what you can connect with the person. So you just said, Emily, oh, it was adding a little bit of color, or noticing how I felt better. So it's a matter of validating what the person eats and then leading them to something that may do well for them, or may just open up their horizons to give them more variety.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nicole, will you tell about people breakfast in Russia, please?
Well, I will speak happily about breakfast in Russia, and I will also say that it's changed, obviously. I mean, I lived there from 1996 until 2007. I'm curious, Julia, have you ever lived in Russia?
No, this is Anita here, but no, I haven't.
I know it's Anita, but Julia is with us, so I'm just wondering, Julia, have you lived in Russia? Julia? Oh, maybe she's gone. Okay. No, I was just curious because we have someone who's actually a Russian person, Estonian Russian. So I found that people just ate what they had for dinner, to be honest. And I do that all the time now. I mean, I made duck on Sunday for dinner, and the next morning I had very little time, so I just took the duck out and I had it, and I was really very happy. So it really works that way. Okay, so hold on one second. Anita, I want to answer fully your question, but Julia says she doesn't have a chance to talk. And let's see if I can give her. Okay. see. Julia, I don't seem to be able to change your status. Can you change her status, Anita?
No, I think we might have run out of panelists. I think that probably is, if you can't do it, because you're the host now.
Okay.
You can't
I'm really sorry, Julia, that you
reach the
can't.
max. Yeah.
Julia, can you write if you have something to say? And I will make sure to monitor. I leave it here so I can see, because it seems I can't give you permission and I want to hear from you for sure. So if you have anything to write, please do. So basically, Anita, that was it. And also, I lived in the Russian Far East, and we ate lots of red caviar for breakfast because we were there on the Japanese Sea, and it was there. So, and then after a while, we ate lots of Chinese things for breakfast because there were lots of Chinese immigrants coming up from the northern part of China into Vladivostok. So it was really a cultural diversity for me living there and just experiencing whatever was. Yeah. So is that a thorough enough answer, Anita?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was amazing when I heard that first. Yeah. I've seen it on the telly as well then, but dishes of potatoes being served in the morning and all of that. So,
yeah. I mean, but if we think about it, in Northern Europe, people eat cheese and herring. I mean, there's all these things that we just don't remember that it's just out of our norm, but it is somebody's norm. Yeah. And this is another way, Anita, you bring up something really important indirectly, is the idea that one of the things that I've had some clients, particularly Italian clients, frankly, who are really very reticent about eating anything out of their norm. And one of the ways I've been able to approach them is to say, okay, well, let's imagine that your norm is somebody else's norm. Let's consider how might someone from a different place eat. And that has given them a little bit of solace on the idea of creating, a different norm. Yeah. Okay. So now we're going to talk about cultural norms and values.
Sorry, excuse me.
Yes.
When you say, with the Italians, so what have you said? So let's imagine how French eats. How, I didn't understand how do you approach the Italian? Because I can see that the Italians don't want to change how they eat.
Well, particularly for breakfast.
Yes, particularly for breakfast. Yeah. So you say what? Like if you were in England, you would be eating this. I'm sure they would say, but I am not and I won't.
In fact, and that can happen. But the first thing I say is, okay, where have you traveled and what have you eaten there? That's the first thing I say.
Right.
The second thing I say, for example, in Sicily, they eat ice cream for breakfast. Okay, it is in the summer when they do that, but ice cream is a standard breakfast. And it's ice cream, it's either lemon or almond. And it's served with a special kind of brioche. So then if they don't go to the outside part, I start talking about, okay, let's talk about different parts of Italy. Because Italy in itself, if we think about it, like most countries, but Italians are quite proud of this, the idea that every region you go to in Italy is going to have different foods. So particularly the breakfast, because that is one that I have found the hardest. I mean, for my husband, a cookie is breakfast. And after 13 years, I'm lucky, he'll eat an almond next to the cookie. I mean, it's just his norm. And that was before he didn't even eat breakfast at all. It was just a cup of coffee. So it's a matter of probing around and finding the spot where they will. So they say, oh, well, I'm definitely not going to eat ice cream for breakfast. And then I turn that around. Okay, we know what you're not going to eat. What else won't you eat for breakfast? Well, I'm not going to eat fish and I'm not going to eat cheese. So then I get a list of what they're not going to eat, which seems like a negative treasure hunt. But then I say, oh, okay, but you didn't mention hazelnuts.
Yes.
Would you consider to buy not Nutella because it's got chocolate and sugar, but would you buy hazelnut paste? And, given that, let's say they can eat hazelnuts, they don't have a nut allergy or anything like that. So it's that probing around, which really, Emily, great question, because it's a matter of how do you find the questions that can lead you to the answer?
Yes. Okay. Great,
yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. It's a really good question. Thank you. And moving forward with Emily's question, considering cultural norms and values in diet and lifestyle recommendations. So we prompt the client with leading questions in the pre-questionnaire and or live in the multi-ethnic, which I've already said. And here are some particular questions. What were your favorite childhood foods? Would you consider repeating them? So for example, Italians, we use that example, they have milk for breakfast as a child. Okay, so you're an adult woman, you're over the age of 50, milk is not the best thing. Would you consider yogurt for breakfast? Would you consider, Emily mentioned kefir for breakfast? Would you consider chia pudding with coconut milk for breakfast? And we begin to go through these things. Maybe that childhood thing they had is no longer appropriate, but how can we build on that childhood thing? Another thing, for example, Americans, what do Americans eat for breakfast? Cereal. What is cereal? Full of sugar, full of probably GMOs, full of complex carbohydrates. Well, would you consider just having oats with milk and adding your own fruit? So as I mentioned before, it's not necessarily, neuroscience, but it's a way to connect and approach with them. And then where have you traveled and have you eaten there that you liked and enjoyed, and would you eat it again? Going back to the same question as before, but coming at it from a different angle. So you mentioned that last year, I see on your questionnaire, you traveled to Southeast Asia. What did you have for breakfast there? Oh, well, we were in a hotel and it was all continental. Okay, was there something on the continental buffet that you really liked? Well, I really liked the ham. Okay, so you're okay with having a little bit of meat for breakfast. You see, it's that exploration that goes beyond the norm. And as I mentioned, in the first year, I feel that Richard does this extraordinarily well. And so we can just capitalize on that, bringing it from a different angle, either about travel, food, childhood. What did your grandmother have for breakfast? You mentioned that I see here that you have an origin of part Spanish. And which of your grandparents was Spanish? Did you ever live with them? Did you share meals with them? What did you like about eating with them? And they may tell you that they ate fried potatoes for breakfast. And obviously this is not what you're going to offer them, but you're going to say, well, would you consider once a week for your lunch meal having fried potatoes, but with olive oil and an egg? I'm making these up, yeah, because we don't know what the dietary constraints are and so forth. But it's a matter of following their lead to what your offer is to them, which I think makes sense, yeah? And then being ready with possible menu ideas. So all of you have either traveled or cultural background within your own families. Even if you've never left Ireland, or I've never left America, or someone's never left Italy, within your own culture, there are people who eat different things. I mean, I suspect, I'm very ignorant, I admit to you, that in the northern part of Ireland and the southern part of Ireland, maybe you have different meals. And Rachel let's see, Lowry, can you tell us, are those differences available in Ireland?
We don't have differences between Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland.
In the food, you mean?
In the food, no, we've got an Irish palate.
Okay. What are the differences within Ireland as far as food?
I would say quality of what people buy, probably to a certain extent. You're looking at that on what they can afford.
Okay. And what else?
I suppose it's quality. I'll go back to the quality and just knowledge around healthier options and how the big food companies can sort of propel us into buying really crap stuff, in other words.
Okay. And if you have someone, Laurie, who is really following the big food and they're not, let's say, wealthy, but they do have the little bit of extra income where they could make those choices, how would you lead them to do that?
Well, my thing in the class is all about the quality of food and tasting it.
Okay.
And when I say that, I usually, when I do demonstrations and that, I usually go, if you buy good quality food or if they improve the quality of the food a little bit, they have less to do with it. There's less cooking involved. You don't have to hide the tastes and that, because a piece of fish with a little bit of butter on it or olive oil is all you need. Or, for example, or just beautiful vegetables, salt, or olive oil again. Buying it in the farmers markets conserves buying them in the farmers market instead of buying them in Tesco's in a plastic bag.
And you bring up something really important, Laurie, which is the fact that we can talk about the idea of culture in quality as well. So, how do you want your family to grow up? How do you want to treat yourself? Where do you want to put your priorities as far as whether it be your budget or your time? And how do you want to live? I mean, I say, keep it simple. How do I want to live the simplest life possible with the highest value of taste and quality? And that can be a way you can bring that around too. And then you can say, in this example, Laurie, you could be the one to say, do you know I've traveled to here, or I've read about this, and bring that to them, because then it can also make people feel like they're expanding their world, which again makes them feel good about their choices.
Sorry, Nicole, that was Maggie, but no worries.
Oh, sorry. I heard Laurie. Sorry.
No, you're okay.
Okay, thank you. I thought it sounded like you, Maggie.
Yeah, don't worry. I'll answer for Laurie as well.
I thought, wow, is Maggie opposing as Laurie?
So no worries. No, I was listening to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for adding, Maggie, because you are, in my opinion, the cooking end answer.
Could I be Mary Berry? No.
I don't know who that is.
Oh, you're okay.
Okay.
She's the baking queen. No worries.
Okay. So one of the things you guys have as IINH folks is being ready with possible menu items related. Maggie gives an enormous amount of recipes, if I recall, and we have lots at our disposal. And many of them are not necessarily culturally couched, but they have to do with the quality of the food and also the different ingredients with color and variety. And those can also be what you lead people with. And that's the number 2 here. And then we move on to exploring and expanding the diet recommendations. So, for example, who here on the course eats before 7 o'clock? Anyone?
Me.
Emily?
Dinner before 7. Dinner, yes. Yeah, I've tried before 7. Usually.
Okay, great. Anyone else?
Yeah, me too. Anita here.
Okay, okay. And is that because you're making a conscious effort to be healthy, or are those things that you do based on the normal way you've always lived?
For me, it would be the way, I was brought up, so I feel most comfortable at eating before 7, yeah.
Okay, okay. And Julia has also said she eats by 6. And then Viviana, never before 8. And Julia, it has cultural roots. And Julia, what are the cultural roots? Is it because your family ate that early as well? We can watch Julia's answer live. And I'm suspecting, Viviana, based on your background being in France as well, it's not before 8. It's the same here with us, not before 8.
In Greece, it's practically 9 or 10 p.m.
Same as in Spain, yeah. Yeah. So sleep is good, yeah. And see, Julia has a very healthy lifestyle because they eat before 6, preferably, so that they don't have disturbed sleep. And this is obviously what we want our clients to do. But any of us who is accustomed to a place where, like in Greece, Spain, France, Italy, if I say to an Italian, you have to eat before 8, they look at me and say, well, then my social life is completely ruined. Yeah. So what I typically say, hold on, let me look here. Oh no, sorry. Always finish eating before 7, Laurie says. Yeah. And this is, I mean, in America as well, people eat between 5:30 and 6. Part of that is they go to bed by 10 and they're up at 5 in the morning. Yeah. So one of the ways to get around this for people who do eat late, because those of you who eat early, you're already on it. Fantastic. Much healthier for us. But culturally, if people aren't used to that, what I typically do is say, okay, what if when you are out with friends, you eat later, but can you 2 or 3 times a week try to eat earlier? For some people, this doesn't work. You know, tomorrow evening, I'll be in Milan with friends because I'll be teaching on Friday in Milan. And before 8 o'clock, they simply cannot possibly eat. What do? They have 1 plate instead of 2. They, in the morning, have a lighter breakfast. It also can be a matter of balancing out. So I feel like as nutritional therapists or as health and nutrition coaches, our job is not to judge the person on what they're eating and when, but to offer them alternatives based on what is possible for them. The ideal thing is to eat before 7 p.m., obviously. This is fantastic. If everyone can do this, we'll sleep better, as one of you wrote, I believe it was Julia, and we'll also have a better digestion. But if someone simply can't make that happen, then we talk about what other meals they eat. I grew up in Rio de Janeiro. We eat very late. Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense, right? The city is lively, so we also sleep late. I mean, I spent a month in Syria during Ramadan. No one was in bed before 4 in the morning. The streets were full. This was 10 years ago. Yeah. And so this is also has to do with it. When does a person wake up? When I lived in Russia, no one was on the street before 10 in the morning. So eating at 8:30 at night was normal. So, Viviana brings a really important moment to us, which is how do we make these things fit together, not just with you have to eat before 7, but how does that fit with the whole cycle of your day and of your life? Because the reality is, Viviana says perfectly, in Rio de Janeiro, people are up late. They go to bed late, they wake up late, and that might be that their biorhythms work that way. So for me, one of the ways that I manage this is I say, okay, what is appropriate time and how do I help you to meet your needs within your possibilities? Yeah. Here in France, people eat before 19 in the region. Yeah. And it's all really different. And so Viviana herself has had to adjust because she herself eats late. Now she's in a place that eats earlier. And so the other thing that Viviana is bringing to us now too is the idea that use your own experiences with your clients, which I'm sure you do. So Viviana can say, yes, I understand you're used to eating late because it's your norm. How might that change for you? Can you change it? Will it work for you? And work around these things, yeah? I'm so glad to get your input, you guys. Oh, sorry, hold on. Okay. Okay, I try to eat around 6 p.m. This is from Ann Daly, thank you. I have diabetes and don't want to have any blood sugar issues during the night. Yeah, if I eat later, I give my insulin, both working while I sleep. Yeah, fantastic. And you bring up something really important, Anne, which is the idea that if a person has a particular health issue, this can actually help us to help them more. Because Anne's saying, listen, I know what my issues are and I know how I feel when those things don't go. And it really takes a toll on my health. And then evenings out with friends are the exception. So that's what we can do. We can say, okay, can you plan so that those evenings out you can take care? So all of you writing and those of you speaking, I really thank you because this is the point. As you mentioned in the beginning, at least 3 of you, sharing your own experiences and not just your experiences with your clients, but also your own experiences. One of the things that I think would be fair to say is that you don't study what we've studied unless you yourself has an interest and maybe even your own issue. And based on that, it's really important to use those issues appropriately. You don't need to expose yourself to your clients, but you can be compassionate and empathize with them. And that in itself creates the trust that you need so that you can help them to make the changes that they need. So when I talk about culture and food, I'm talking not just about the idea of the food and the time and so forth, but also how do we put ourselves in their shoes and let them enter into our shoes to create that symbiosis of trust. Yeah. And then as before, one of you mentioned, I think that it was Lori, but now I don't want to make that mistake again, with religious considerations. It's not necessarily just Ramadan. It could be who goes to church every Wednesday night. It could be who is Jewish and doesn't eat pork. It could be who's a Buddhist and doesn't eat meat. I mean, there are so many things that play into what's happening, and how we explore those things, not just because it's interesting or just because it might make a difference, but because it helps us make a connection with our client and that we can use that connection to help them find what works for them. And, one of the things that I think can be challenging is to want to have all the answers and to want to provide and give to our clients, and recognizing that maybe they already have it. And what my job is to pull it out of them, and to offer them my experiences so that they can have their own memories or their own ideas jogged. And that can also have a lot to do with food and culture. So now time of day for a meal. We talked about this already, so I won't really repeat, but just the idea of integrating and benefiting from the suggestions. And I have this one here on purpose, this Spanish one, where there are just naturally 5 meals because of the way the day goes. And looking at the things that you've already said about how meal times have to do with not just one meal or another, but integrating them into how we eat as a whole during the day. Looking at soup for breakfast. Anita brought up the Russian one. If you've ever lived in Vietnam, if you visited Vietnam, po is a particularly usual breakfast there, and it's what people have. And we can have that as well. I mean, I love some clients, one of the things I suggest to them first thing in the morning is miso soup, because it helps them. It gives them what they need as far as an energizer. It's something warm, and it also helps their digestion. Other clients, that wouldn't be something that they could consider. Yeah. So, you know, which of these is breakfast for you? What are appropriate meal choices? We have the standard one down here, the porridge, the high carb, high sugar Italian breakfast up here on the right, and then the Asian breakfasts, which are, I think, probably just as healthy as the porridge, frankly, and depending upon where you are. Richard mentioned that being in Malaysia, it's not so obvious anymore that just because people are Asian, they have a good diet. I know that I have some Chinese clients, and one of their issues has been integrating into Italy. They're eating a lot more dairy and having a lot more milk, and they can't digest it. And how do they get back to their original norms living in a culture that is so not conducive to that? Yeah. Have any of you had any clients who are from another country and have found the Irish diet difficult? Anyone? I'm looking to see here. No? Irish breakfast not working for any of your Asian clients, or no? Okay. So I keep moving. Okay, so, oops. Yay, someone wrote something. Okay, so let's see. Irish breakfast doesn't work for me, Viviana says. Hi guys, hi to Bazia. I found Irish meals are very heavy when I first came. We can't hear you, Bazia, but I can see what you're writing, so please continue to do so. Now, those of you who've said Irish breakfasts are heavy for you, can you tell us what have your alternatives been for yourselves? Or write to us. I prefer you speak if you can, but you can write as well. You can see that everyone can see here.
Nicole, it's Maggie here again. I think most people can probably source all the ingredients they want to, you know, from their own countries. It's just sourced here, all the products. So most people probably can cook what they're familiar with from home.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Some parts of the countries and other countries don't have that. You know, I know Richard's daughter lived in Tenerife. I find it very hard to get a lot of stuff, you know, that should, you know, the stuff you normally get in a health food shop and that. But here we're so cosmopolitan here now.
In fact,
you know.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and when I say what is Irish breakfast, what I want to provoke is the idea that if you have a client who's used to having an Irish breakfast because they're Irish, or an English breakfast, and maybe they won't go to porridge either. So if I build on my own experiences, for example, both Julia and Viviana found that didn't work, that's a great way for them also to connect to their client and say, whatever their client is from, and say, you know, I have found breakfast to be heavy here. So what I've done is this. Would you consider doing that? Because those of us, you know, who have experiences like that can offer them to our clients as well. Yeah, Polish and Russian shops, etc. So you can have blini and caviar for breakfast if you want. Any other experiences with different meals that you've offered to your clients or that you've offered to yourself? Anyone? No. Okay. So what I have here is I would like you also to offer your recipes. If you found last year, we got a bunch. So warm smoothies, fast and comforting. Okay. Julia, when you say fast and comforting, do you mean that the smoothies are fast and comforting? Because you mentioned also that you fast, Viviana. So I want to make sure I'm clear here. Yeah, smoothies are fast. Yeah, I fast now in days in the morning. Okay. And Viviana, do you fast every day? Okay. Yeah, the smoothies can be really good. And for example, I have a Swiss client who says to me, I will drink smoothies when I don't have teeth. So, you know, it's always it's always a matter of, you know, what people are willing to do and where they feel comfortable as well. Yeah. So what I want to offer you here as we wrap up, is I have all of these are links. You can go to them and you'll find the recipes, and Anita's going to send these to you. So for example, this is my Russian New Year kale salad, and all of these are links to different recipes. And I tried to give you as many recipes from around the world as I could. I have a Russian one, I have an Italian American, two Italians. This one is Iranian, Persian. Excuse me. This is a gluten-free soda bread, which is a take on a Maggi soda bread. And this is a Milanese spinach egg soup. And then here at this link, you'll find 11 recipes from last year's class. So all of these are available to you straight directly on my website. And then would anyone like to offer recipes to us that we can then share with the group? Okay.
I'll have to think about that one.
Absolutely.
As in,
Yes.
you want something Greek, or you want something I use and give to my clients now? Something
Both,
that
to be
works.
honest with you. Last year we got some fantastic recipes from around the world, which are available to you, like I said, at that link. So what I'd like to do, so that really at the end of the day we have a mix of things, is you don't have to give them to us now. Let me just go here so you can see. So what's going to happen is that you share your recipes, you send them to me at this address here by or before Monday the 25th, and then I will format them so they're all consistent, and I'll send them to Anita, and then she will send you a link with all of the materials. So if you have ideas now, I'll write them down just so that I can make sure that I'm aware of them. But really the idea is that we have as many recipes to share with you as possible. And last year we had 11. We had more people interacting, but we had 11. And this year, even if we come up with 5 more, one from each of you, that's great. Hold on, I go back here. So does anyone off the top of their head, Emily's already said, you know, should I do Greek ones or should I do ones I give my clients? My answer is both. If you think it could benefit to other people, let's please share them if you're happy to do that. And I'm happy to write them down if anyone has any ideas off the top of their head.
Can you, oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes?
Yeah, sorry, Nicole. Can you link up some of our recipes from IINH, my recipes from the IINH website?
I'd love that. Can we do that, Anita?
You need to hear you?
Yeah, absolutely. I just need to know which ones, Maggie.
Oh, yeah, we can.
Yeah,
Nicole,
please, and one.
what sort of ones you'd like that could be universal, or I can look to see which ones might be universal. But there's always a standard recipe that I think we all eat, or something, you know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like just variations, say for tart or omelets or something like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know,
Your nutrient bombs.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what to eat them in Italy now.
Well, the idea is the more recipes we share, because Maggie, your recipes are fantastic, and I've sort of reworked the gluten-free soda bread because I make it all the time. But if you have recipes that you want to share, I'm so happy. I just wouldn't allow myself permission to share yours. I mean, they're yours.
Listen, you don't have to ask. You know, just I don't know. Anita might be able to. I can chat to Anita tomorrow and see.
Okay. Okay, great. And then we'll put them up. Because if we put them up in the context of this cultural idea, it expands their use as well.
Yeah. Fantastic. And Nicole, you've been brilliant. You're amazing. You sound fantastic. Your knowledge is just wonderful.
Well, it's really, I'm grateful to all of you who give your information too, because the fact of the matter is, I mean, I'm happy to sit here and you know, give my info, but really the most important thing is that you take your own experiences from your travels and your cultures and you offer them to your clients. I mean, this is what makes you so fantastic in the classroom when you're teaching us to cook, Maggie, because you put yourself in it. And this is what makes people feel comfortable to then put themselves in it. You know, the idea that when we first came up with this class, it was partially about how do we integrate culture into our questions and into our meal ideas, but it's also how do we find that connection? And culture can be one of those ways. And two of you mentioned, the diversity of your clients, and that diversity might not necessarily mean that someone's from a different culture. It may have to do with different experiences and different ideas and values around food. And if we can discover those and we can present those to our clients in a way that they feel comfortable and empowered by them, then it gives us more space to help them heal. Mm-hmm. So to wrap up, I just want to, you guys, I've given you this as well. These are some books that I use. And again, these are all links, so you can click on them and you'll get links. And then those of you who have Netflix, there's the table, the Chef's Table, which I'm waiting to see you on the Chef's Table, Maggie. It's a great series, and it offers some really interesting insights into culture. Some of you probably already watch it. That's fantastic. And I find this little book of lunch has been really good. And this one, The History of Taste, this is not necessarily going to give you ideas for your clients, but because I'm like an archaeologist of food, I'm so curious about the origins of food. And this food, The History of Taste, gave me a lot of background knowledge that helps me then talk to my clients in a more comprehensive way, and help to poke them to their own comprehension. And then here I have some websites with some recipes for you. Again, you'll just be able to click on them and they'll go right to the sites and you can look them up. And if by the 25th you have some ideas that you'd like to share with us, please give them to us, because we are happy. I mean, I speak for myself and Maggie because I think we're on the same wavelength for sure with all our discussions. We're happy the more we can offer you, and that's how the sharing happens between the students and the alumni as well. So we thank you for those. And as we said, by the 25th, if you'll send them to me, if you can just take down my address, because you won't have it yet. I don't think, Anita, they don't have my address, do they?
No, not yet, Nicole.
Okay, great. So if you'll just, I'm going to leave this slide up for a minute, and if you'll just take a minute to take it down, it's just my name.food@gmail.com. And that way you can send to me. If for some reason you don't have my email address, you can send them to Anita. And Anita, if you send them to me, I'll format them.
Will do.
Yeah, okay. And then I think, yeah, that's me. That's my website. You're welcome to go check it out anytime you like. It's often under construction. And my website is sort of a funky little mix. I think Richard called it quirky or something the other day. I love that. It's about food and travel and philosophy, and you're welcome to have a look at that. And I've just published a children's book, which you're welcome to have a look at if any of you have children you'd like to check that out at. And most of all, thank you so very much. I'm really grateful to have had this chance to interact with you and to offer you my experiences. And I hope that in even the smallest way, it leaves you feeling more empowered about how you interact with clients and how you participate in someone else's healing. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Nicole. That was fantastic.